Hello. How are you? Good morning.
I just said I need somebody. I said, that's not getting me coming out the car.
You get the other side of it or no?
You want to grab this over
I
here?
don't know. Is it good?
Why do you have to get a
I think we're
picture of
good.
you guys when we wait?
I like my water chair.
She got on it, was like, what's that? 1, 2, 3. Can you see closer?
Probably stand up.
Why they, or you can stand up, just until they're not ready that way.
Oh, stand up to take a
Because
picture.
afterwards, you guys get bombarded, so.
Smile, Greg.
Correct.
I was looking at Gregory.
1, 2, 3. Perfect.
Okay.
Is that okay with you?
We can use your assistance since you're a great boss.
Yes?
The S-22.
No,
It must be
it's
a seven.
21.
We're at 22, yeah.
So I guess probably the seven. I use.
Just all the clean all the.
How's my girl?
Good.
That's all right.
Cut off a lot of her hair.
Why?
It's just too old.
Do you mind if I see one so I can figure out where to put my
5 inches, what about two?
Still past your shoulders.
We're good?
Is this one?
Yeah.
It's so sad.
Another thing.
All right. All right, let's get started, you guys. Thank you guys for being here. My hope is that when you guys walk out of here, you have a clear understanding of why you should be buying and holding real estate, why real estate is so important for your financial future, and why buying and holding real estate is the strategy that you guys need to have. And so in real estate investing, there's two strategies. There's only two strategies. There's the buy for cash strategy, which underneath buy for cash is wholesaling and flipping properties. And you guys know what wholesaling is. We just had a class on that 2 weeks ago. And flipping properties, we'll buy a property buy a property with a lot of equity in it, renovate the property, and then sell it. That's flipping. That's buying for cash. And so that's one strategy. What's good about that strategy is that you can make quick cash. What's bad about it is it's active income. And so you buy the property, you sell it, it's just one payday. So that's active income. What we want is passive income. So the other strategy is buying for cash flow, equity and appreciation. And so that's buying and holding real estate, buying and holding residential properties, commercial properties, multifamily properties. That's passive income. You buy the house one time and you could have that property for you, your generation, your children, your children's children. That's the goal. And so sometimes we have to combine the two strategies in order to have the cash to then buy and hold. And so we're going to talk about buying and holding. And my goal for you guys, my goal is for you to buy and hold at least one property this year. That's my goal for you. To buy and hold, whether it's a condo, whether it's a residential property. Some of my coaching students are buying Airbnb, multifamily, whatever that is, that's the goal. And so you've got to put yourself in a position where you can buy and hold. You got to get the cash, and then credit plays a factor. There's some creative financing strategies that I may talk about, but at the end of the day, you want to leverage other people's money to buy and hold. You want to get rich and get wealthy off of other people's money, investing other people's money, like banks, hard money lenders, private lenders, to buy and hold. And so those are the things that we're going to talk about. I have one of my real estate agent investors from, how long have you been with me? Since my RE/MAX days?
2004.
since 2004, almost 20 years. Lyric, and so Lyric, why don't you introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about you?
Sure. My name is Lyric Hawkins, and I started in real estate in 2004 on Greg's team. And that's when I first got introduced to real estate, and I made sure that I worked with the best of the best. I had this little checklist of who I was going to work with, and he was at the top of the list. And getting into the real estate industry, I looked at it from an agent's perspective, but I didn't really look at it from an investor's perspective until you get a little older and realize, oh shoot, I ain't got no retirement. So you start making different decisions to just better your future. And, we're getting a little up there, so things are different. So now I just invest in a lot of properties and deal with business credit and creative financing to get that goal accomplished.
And so you've been buying properties the last couple of years too, right?
Yeah. Well, we made some mistakes and sold some that we probably shouldn't have sold. And looking back, you're like, oh, I don't want to do that again. But I have a commercial building as well, which houses a business that actually we got through the SBA. I don't know if I kind of recommend that. There's a lot of red tape, but it works. Along with some buy and holds that I have with Section 8 tenants in it. And the one we're working on now is going to be more like a group home.
And then we have Jay, the AKA Beyonce. And so Jay is one of my coaching students. Why don't you introduce yourself?
I mean, you just did. So I'm Jay, everybody, short for Japera. So I joined Greg's coaching program, I think March of last year. And so I had already dabbled into real estate prior. So I'm a real estate attorney, started out in New York, and then took a stab at real estate investing myself with some tax liens in Baltimore City. We can talk a little bit more about that later on. And then really wanted a formal mentorship program to teach me how to really do it, how to really scale it step by step. And so I joined Greg's coaching program, and it's been great ever since.
Good. And so if you guys want to join the program too, you can. Where's Keith? Did Keith leave?
He went to get the food.
Okay, that's important. So we'll have Keith speak, Coach Keith speak in a minute. And so you guys, one of the first things that you've got to learn, first of all, it's all about your mindset. And so you've got to put it in your mind that you want to build wealth, and you've got to focus on that. And you've got to say to yourself, I'm going to build wealth and learn how to build wealth through real estate investing by any means necessary. And I'm going to stay focused on that. Even though the crowd around me, they may not, really be into that. That's why it's so important to join a coaching program or to be part of a community of like-minded people. So it starts all up here with your mind, your mindset, and then you focus on really learning. And I do think that for a lot of us, I started really young, bought my first house out of college. It was a buy and hold in DuPont Circle in DC. I was 23 years old, didn't know, I just knew that I wanted to be great and I wanted to be wealthy. And so I saw an ad in the Washington Post in the classified section, and it was a condo in DuPont Circle. So I just went down there, and I had learned from this gentleman by the name of Carlton Sheets. Anybody ever heard of Carlton Sheets? Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm not the only old person here. And I just applied what I learned, and I was able to negotiate seller financing on that property. It was a one-bedroom condo in DuPont Circle, and I've been buying properties ever since. My goal at that time was to buy one property a year, buy and hold it, and I've pretty much been able to do that. But I put it in my mind that this is what I want to do. I read in an encyclopedia at 17 years old that basically the way to wealth was through real estate investing. 95% of all the wealth is people who own real estate. And so I read that, and for me, it was an epiphany moment. And so it starts with your mind and your mindset. And then it goes to kind of preparing yourself for the end. You've got to start thinking about the end and what you want the end to look like. So we start with the end in mind. And so what's the end in mind? Meaning when you retire, you want to start thinking about, even now, what type of retirement do you want? What type of lifestyle? How much money do you want? in retirement, knowing that inflation will play a role, $20,000 a month in positive cash flow, $30,000 a month in positive cash flow, $50,000 a month in positive cash flow. You got to start thinking that way, and that's how I thought. And so even at that young age, my thought was, I want to have $100,000 in positive cash flow when I retire. And so I start with the end in mind, and then I said, okay, what do I need to do? How many units, how many doors do I need to own? What type of cash flow do I need in order to get to that big goal? And so you guys need to do the same thing. Set a big goal for yourself. Like, what's the big goal? What do you want your life to be, your retirement to look like? And then obviously, when you're able to reach that goal, you have assets. You have what we call doors that you can then use while you're living. We talk about living benefits while you're living, and then you can pass those doors or those properties to your loved ones. And so let me ask these guys. And so early on in my early 20s, and I'm not far off from my early 20s right now. Is that funny, Valerie?
Hilarious.
I'm with Valerie on that.
Valerie said that's hilarious. And so that was my goal. What have you guys thought about that for yourselves in terms of a goal? Go ahead, Jay.
For sure. So, okay, going to school, spending so much time in school, working a career as an attorney that's mentally taxing, and then venturing off into entrepreneurship and working a business that's physically taxing. I was like, okay, this is gonna get old real quick. Like, it's aging right now. So I was like, okay, I want to be free. And what does freedom look like for me? It looks like passive income. And then I also remember family members passing on, and we having to think about, how to pay for this, how to pay for that. And so I also didn't want that to happen. And so I wanted to leave a legacy for my niece. I don't have children yet, but I wanted to leave a legacy for my niece. So freedom for me, and then generational wealth to come. And so that's exactly what I did. I started with the end goal in mind, and then I'm slowly building up to where that makes sense.
How about you, Larry?
I'm clear, I don't want to work anymore. That's the goal. Because physically working, I realized I'm tired, right? And recently, because I own 2 daycare centers, and the liability on that is so high, I'd rather just figure out how to fix a broken washing machine. I promise you. And I realized I want to travel more. I want to just sit on the beach. I want to, work from my laptop. Well, what does that look like? Because I still have to eat. I have a young adult daughter. And if any of you all have young adult children, they think they know it all, and they really don't. And so I have to figure out, how can I make sure she's straight? Because she has a daughter now. How can I do all the things I need to do and it doesn't hurt me? Because being an entrepreneur, I've been up, I've been down, I've been, had great months, and then I had some horrible years.
And so that's one of the first things. I want you guys to identify the areas that you want to purchase. And so I actually own property in here, PG County, DC, Anne Arundel, and Annapolis, and Baltimore. The reason I picked some of those areas is because you can buy low and rent high. As a matter of fact, Baltimore is the #1 residential rental area in the United States because you can buy low and rent high. And so most of the properties that I purchased in Baltimore, I bought them in what we call B or C neighborhoods that I purchased for $40,000, $50,000, $60,000. And now they're worth a little over, I'll say 200, 250,000. But more importantly, since they're buying holds, they rent for $1,700, $1,800, $1,900 a month. Some of them are free and clear. So I don't have any mortgages, but all of them cash flow. And so almost all of them, for me, they cash flow at about $1,000 a month in positive cash flow. And so that's Baltimore. And I make sure that they cash flow there because one of the downsides of Baltimore is little to no appreciation. And so they're not going to appreciate. So when you buy the properties, you've got to buy the properties right where it has a certain amount of equity on your way in when you buy the property. Lyric, you've actually explored properties. I think Jay just mentioned like Detroit, Cleveland, areas like that. Why did you look in those areas?
I looked in Cleveland again for a low entry point, and Cleveland is an hour flight. So you got time to sit in the airport, it's only an hour away. So we go up and come right back. But it was a low entry point. And when I was starting out, I was like, okay, where can I go? And Section 8 can be, utilized as well, but I got to get in. How do I get in? And so Cleveland was one of those markets that we looked at and was like, oh, this is all right. It reminds me of Baltimore a little bit, but not as, it's a little slower pace. And the expectations there, believe it or not, from the tenants are not that high. So what we do with the agreeable grade paint and the granite color, that's like, whoa, to them. So, and it's just a town that everybody's a renter. It's not a lot of home ownership there. And so it's a great place to start if you don't have a lot of money and you got some time.
And then, so for us, that's the same for Baltimore. And so 40% of the workforce in Baltimore rent right in the city. And so you've got a big rental base there in Baltimore. So that's what makes Baltimore so attractive. And then if you're looking for multifamily, multiple doors, Baltimore's in our area one of the best places. Some people like DC, and I like DC and own properties in DC, but what DC is great for is, somebody tell me, why do we invest in DC?
Well, the Airbnb.
No, I was going to say appreciation. So you're getting great appreciation. You're paying more for the properties, and they're not cash flowing like a Baltimore, but they're still cash flowing. The cost of entry is a little higher, but that's offset by the appreciation. And so DC has seen probably over the last 5 years about 20% appreciation, which means you buy a house today, it doubles in value in 5 years. And so that's what we've seen there. And so that's why a lot of people invest in places like DC because of the appreciation. And then DC is the capital of the United States. And so any capital city of any country, that market, that rental market, that real estate market will always be good. Even in a recession, pandemic, values really never, they may level, but they'll never go down. Always appreciate the capital city. And so we're fortunate to be really close to DC and 45 minutes for some to Baltimore. And so we've got, good choices. And so you've got to determine what you want and where you want to be. Some people, they don't have a stomach for Baltimore, which is fine. But where do you want to be? Right here where we are, PG County, best of both worlds. You're getting appreciation, you're getting cash flow, you're not getting the appreciation that you do in DC. The entry is a little more expensive than Baltimore, but not that much more. And so the best of both worlds. So you decide where you want to start and then go from there. The second thing on the list is once you've identified where you want to be, we've got to understand how to buy these properties. And so we want to make sure we get a good deal. And so what's a good deal on a rental property? A good deal is I still run for residential, I still run my numbers. I still look at the Mayo formula. Mayo stands for maximum allowable offer. I run the formula 70% of the after repair value minus repair costs. 70% of the after repair value minus repair costs is the formula that I use to buy properties, to flip and to buy and hold. So I still use that formula. I also, so in order to get the after repair value, what we call the ARV, we have to run comps to buy the properties. For rental properties, you guys, you have to also run the rental comps. You're not a real estate agent, get a real estate agent to run the rental comps for you. You need to know what the property is going to rent for once you purchase the property. And you compare what it's going to rent for. Let's say, for example, property is going to rent for $2,500 a month. You want to make sure that when you're financing that property, that your mortgage is going to be a lot less than that. And I would say you want to start off even in like DC or Prince George's County, a minimum of $500 a month in positive cash flow. You want to be positive at least $500. If it's Baltimore, a little higher than that, I'll say $800. But and so the only way you're going to know that is you got to meet with your lender. The lender's going to tell you, if I finance this property, this is what your mortgage payment's going to be. And so let's say your mortgage payment's going to be $2,000 a month. You want to make sure that the rental comps or what you can rent the property is at least, in my opinion, $500 in positive, $500 a month, so that you have at least $500 a month in positive cash flow. Especially if you're in an area that's really appreciated in value. Do you guys look at your numbers that way or any other way?
Yeah, I do. I always have to know what I'm going to get from my properties. Like you said with the DC, it's not a lot of cash flow, but in long term it makes sense. But I was like, I need a little money. So that's when I decided to go the group home way so I can get some cash flow coming out of the property. And with Cleveland, you can use a credit card and buy that property. So everything that comes in is cash flow. And technically you own it free and clear because it's on a credit card and not a mortgage company. So if you default on the credit card, nobody takes your property. Don't default on the credit card. But you can do that and then it's all cash flow too. So those things make a difference. I have to look at that.
How about you, Jay?
I buy the properties really, really, really right. All of them, doesn't matter where. So Baltimore, PG County, I haven't dipped in DC yet.
You just bought one in District Heights.
Really right.
And so what are you going to rent that one out?
Yeah.
Okay. And then you've got a couple in Baltimore. The one that our coaching students visited, how much did you pay for that one?
Which one? You visited both?
One on the corner?
Yeah.
Windsor?
Yeah.
Oh, that's the one I strong under, 117,
Okay.
and it appraised for 240.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
That's good.
So you got equity, you've got cash flow in that.
But I mean, also factor into my renovation costs, right? And so how am I gonna renovate the property? It's a different renovation process with the rental property versus a flip, you know what I mean? And I factor those costs into, because I wanna get all my money back out. So, I use all cash, so I buy the properties all cash, renovate all cash, and then refi and get all my money back out. So my monthly payment has to make sense with my purchase price and my rental costs. I also factor into any costs, like soft costs, like inspection costs. If I'm gonna do a tenant placement person, I factor all that stuff in. And I wanna get every single dime back out. So is that rental amount gonna make sense with the amount that I've mortgaged? And so if it does, then it's a go for me. If it doesn't, maybe a wholesale is a little bit better of an option. I don't really flip, but maybe wholesale or something like that.
And so there's other expenses too. What are the other expenses, you guys? And so when we're buying whole properties, rental properties, we do have a mortgage payment. But what are some of the other expenses that you have to consider? Inspections, taxes, insurance.
Property manager.
If you have a property manager, that's generally around 8%. What
You
else?
Calculate your budget, right, first time.
So you gotta factor into if something, I mean, obviously, we try to renovate as best as possible for a rental,
Mhm.
but there's stuff that just will happen.
It will
just
happen, yeah.
So you
It
have to
happened
factor
with
into
me.
that as well.
And then maintenance. So all along the way, there's maintenance costs on the property. And I generally calculate somewhere around maybe $500 a month a door for my maintenance costs. Just calculate that into my numbers. And so do the numbers. Where people fail on buying whole properties is not doing the numbers. Buying and holding, like anything else, it's a numbers game. It's math. Get your math right. You have to have your math correct. That's why we've got to start off with such a high cash flow, because all of that is not profit. We have expenses on buying holds, and that's where I see people fail. And so make sure you get all your numbers correct on your buy and hold, and just know exactly what you're doing. Here's another thing, you guys. Let's say you are cash flowing at $500 a month, whatever, $600, $800 a month. Put that money in the bank. That's not spending money. That's not money that you go out and you use that money for a car note or anything like that. Put that money in the bank, because you never ever know what could happen with the property. And I've got all kinds of stories, but almost every week there's something that's going on with one of my properties that I've got to go do. Just recently, we had 2 toilets in one property that was leaking. And it's for those reasons that a lot of investors get out of the game. One strategy that we use as investors is we go after tired landlords. We go after absentee owners, especially out-of-state absentee owners. And the reason why we do that is because they're tired of being landlords, because they're tired of either chasing to get the money or they're tired of the repair costs. An absentee owner, a landlord, keeps their house on average about 4 to 5 years. And it's because they're just tired of being a landlord and they're tired of dealing with tenants. And so you've got to put yourself in a position where each property is its own entity. It's its own business. You got to treat it as such, which means initially I wouldn't take any money for my own personal use until after at least a year or so. You need to have a cushion in the bank just in case something comes up, knowing that property is growing in equity through appreciation. So you're making money. You want to be in this game of buying and holding and building a portfolio forever. You don't want to have to, and I've made those mistakes myself. You don't ever want to have to sell a property. When you buy a property, you keep it, unless you have a strategy where I'm going to sell these properties and I'm going to take the money and move up and maybe buy a multifamily. But for the most part, I wouldn't even suggest that. If you have enough equity in these properties, you pull the equity out, that's tax-free money, and then you invest that into another vehicle while you still have that asset. Keep your assets. Again, that's one mistake that I made. I started buying, like I said, at 23, but then when the recession hit, I started to survive the recession in 2007, 2008. I sold some of my properties. And so that's one of my biggest regrets. And so if you don't take any notes today, write this down. If you buy a property, hold it forever and do whatever it takes. Another thing is, don't move too fast. Don't get too eager. Buy one property at a time. Yes, I'm looking over there. We get into the habit of, we get our adrenaline flowing and we want to build cash flow and we set big goals for ourselves. And one mistake that we make is we buy too many at once. And then for a lot of different reasons, buying properties and managing a portfolio sometimes it's cash intensive. And so eventually you're gonna run out of money. And so you just need to make sure that you buy one at a time, make sure it's cash flowing, make sure everything in terms of maintenance is intact, then you buy another property. But buying 2 properties at a time or 3 properties at a time, I see a lot of people getting in trouble. Lots of houses that we buy are properties that the investor started and couldn't finish. So take your time. Dana, take your time, okay? Don't get too eager. Jay?
Yes, I hear you. Loud and clear.
Do
I'm
you
sorry.
find a lot of properties where investors started?
So do we find a lot of properties that investors start and can't finish?
Right, yeah.
Absolutely. Too many. And sometimes, and it's all because they run out of money for various reasons. Oftentimes it's change orders that they go into the property and the contractor says it's going to be a $70,000 renovation. These are all the things we're going to do. And then you get in and it's either you take a wall down and there's this, you have asbestos or you've got termite damage or whatever, and that constitutes what's called a change order. Now the contractor's coming back and said, I need $5,000 more, or I need $10,000 more, or even more than that. And so they run out of money. Don't let that happen to you guys, but one at a time, okay? Let's take our time. Building wealth takes time. It takes time. And so take your time when you're building your wealth, and then you're gonna look up and say, wow, I've got these 5 properties at bottom right. It took me 5 years, but I've got $500,000 in equity, or I've got $1 million in equity. And all I did was just do everything right, and I took my time. Yeah.
Yeah, I got a question.
Go ahead.
How do you, like with your tenants, how do you do month-to-month, yearly leasing contract? And also I got another question. How do you find tenants that got good credit, that pay their monthly payments on time? I don't want to get a tenant
Section
and they
8.
don't pay on time and they delinquent. So how do you?
I use Section 8. They're never late. They're never late. It doesn't make a difference what their credit is. They're not paying.
Well, yeah, and so section 8,
Well, they're already on the list by the time they come to us.
you do qualify, but you don't necessarily qualify through your credit. But I even run credit with Section 8. Even though I know the city or the county is gonna pay me, I still run the credit.
Yeah, and
Sometimes the
that's
credit tells a story.
Mhm.
What was your first question? How do you find tenants?
No, like how do the leasing contract? Do you do
Month to month.
Month. Yeah, definitely a year.
A year.
Definitely a year. Yeah, you definitely want a year.
I had a question about the 2 BRRRRs that you were doing. Is there a specific mortgage or investor loans that have like 0 to 3 month seasoning versus like a 6-month seasoning that you would recommend in Baltimore?
Lenders?
Yeah, for like the cash out refi, because
Yeah.
usually it's a 6 month. So is there any like credit unions that would do like 6 to 3 month seasoning?
Yeah, talk to me after, I got you.
Okay, cool.
So I have 2 questions. First, when you said that you wouldn't buy, more than 1 property at a time, so what time frame do you recommend to buy the next one?
So I would recommend once everything is completed. If you're using BRRRR, and I'll talk about what BRRRR means in a second, but if you're buying a property either with cash or let's say a hard money lender, and then you're renovating the property, and then you're going to rent the property out, and then you refinance into permanent financing. Once all that is done, and I would say maybe 6 months to a year after that, let's just get comfortable with that rental property. Let's get comfortable with the tenant. Let's get comfortable, make sure that the property is in great condition, there's no issues, and then venture out and buy another property. Just initially take your time. Build a cushion in your bank account just in case something happens. So that takes time. And so, for example, if it's cash flowing at $500 a month, put a year's worth of that cash flow in the bank. Because where you're going to run into trouble and trust me, I'm speaking for experience, is you're gonna have 13 properties, and let's say either 3 or 4 of them, the tenant's not paying, so you gotta subsidize that, or just something goes wrong with the property. Now you've got a portfolio of properties that, now you've gotta, make those payments, you gotta fit, and so have some money in the bank. So just get comfortable with that. Then I would say, go ahead and buy your next one. But don't be over leveraged, basically.
Okay, I have one more question, I'm sorry. Can you talk more about buying a property in Cleveland with a credit card?
She said, I like that.
Yeah.
It's just basically pulling cash off your credit card, right?
Yeah, so the thing with Cleveland, the entry point is very low.
Mhm.
So you can get a property for $40,000. I've seen a 4-unit, there was 1 bedroom in each unit, 4-unit for $99,000.
Mhm.
So I've seen that. And the prices went up a little bit, but they're coming back down. But with prices at that price point, if you're getting business credit, 'cause I wouldn't recommend personal, okay? Because we all know, you mess up your credit score when you max out your cards. So you want to use business credit in order to pay for that. And there's a company called Plastique, and they will take the money from the card and wire it directly to the title company
How do you spell that? You said Plastique?
Plastique.
with a Q on the end.
I've done that too.
Yeah, so you want to make sure that it's your business credit, not your personal.
So you
And then
need
it's
good
simple.
personal credit though.
Mhm.
You need
Yeah,
good
the
personal
person to
credit.
guarantee it.
So they're gonna look at your personal credit.
Yeah, but when you get to a certain level, you don't have to guarantee it no more. But it's getting to that point, and you will, it happens.
And then whatever lender that you pick for the business credit card, make sure they don't report to your personal side. So Capital One, for example, does.
Mhm.
Navy Federal does. Chase does not. US Bank, write that down.
Yeah,
US
yeah.
Bank does not. Citizens does not.
So you just have to make sure, when you're going in, when you go in the front door, you always gotta see the back door,
Mhm.
and that's on everything.
Okay.
Yeah, but just make sure it's your business. But I will say this, you're not gonna get it if you don't have your entity set up right.
That's right.
So get with Lyric at the end, or get her information. She's an expert on all of those things.
Okay.
Dana?
Yeah, I just want to jump back on to over purchasing that you were just talking about. Many years ago when I was trying to invest, I was investing, that was one of the main causes of me failing and falling on my face is I overdid it. I didn't have a mentor to tell me, don't do that. So I did that and lost everything.
And so while we're talking about financing, there's different ways to finance. We asked some good questions about financing. And so one thing that I would do in terms of buying and holding is get with a lender. We have a lender in your handout. Let's see what page it's on. What page is it on, you guys? Page 3, actually. And so that's one of our preferred lenders on page 3. Give her a call. She's financed 2 of my properties. And she has all of the programs that you guys need in terms of buying and holding. So what I would do, you guys, is before I ventured out to buying and holding properties, I would meet with my lender first. It's just like when you're buying residential properties, you get pre-qualified and get a pre-qualification letter. Even if you're using the Burr method, you want to get with a lender who's going to eventually finance you. You need to know what interest rates, programs, how much money down, how much equity you need in the properties in order to purchase the properties. If you have enough equity, there's some programs where when you go to refinance, you don't need any money. You don't need any money down. And so you want to get with those programs. Sometimes even with when you're initially buying and holding buying a property with a hard money lender, you can, here's one thing that I've done. And so I bought a property using a hard money lender. So the hard money lender financed my acquisition and my rehab. Now I needed money for closing costs and to get the contractor started. I used a private lender to finance those things. And so I bought the properties right. I got the financing, from those two entities. I rented it out Section 8. And then when I went to refinance, not only was I able to refinance in a way that I paid off my hard money lender and my private lender, I had enough equity in the property, 70%, where I didn't have to come to the table with any money with the permanent finance, which means I own this asset and I put none of my own money into that deal. You guys with me?
When you're saying buying right, are you like for your students, are you recommending that they actually like do the wholesale deal themselves, or are you connecting them with wholesalers that are finding the deals?
Both. My students are just doing marketing. They're sending out postcards. They're contacting, going to the auctions. They're contacting, like I said, absentee owners. They're doing a number of things to find deals. And then, so they're finding the deals, they're financing them. They're basically using the Burr method to finance their deals and buy the properties.
Can you speak on private lenders and what is the best way to go about?
So a private lender is us, is anybody in this room. It's someone that you know, preferably family member, friend. That's a private lender who has money. They have money in the bank. They have money, let's say in a 401k. They could have money in an insurance policy. And they're just lending you the money for a certain interest rate. And so you've got to present them a package that says, I would like to borrow money from you on a short-term basis. Let's just say it's 6 months, or once I refinance, I will pay you, let's just say 8% interest or 10%, whatever you negotiate. This is the property. Give them a printout of the property, pictures, the tax record, the comps, everything that you can, everything that you would give a normal lender, scope of work, contractors information, give them all those things. You present the package to them and you see if they're going to lend you the money. So it's all of those things. There's different creative financing strategies that I've used. That I won't go over, it's not a creative financing class, but there's different ways that you can finance your buy and holds, especially on the Burr method. My daughter will be buying a house this year. I took out an IUL, Index Universal Life Policy, for her when she was 13. She's 24, getting ready to be 25. She's got, I don't know, $35,000 in her cash value in her insurance policy that she can borrow the money from herself, from her policy, and take it out tax-free. Use that money to be her own private lender. And then once she refinances, she can pay herself back. You guys with me? I've got Phil here. Phil, once you stand up, he's part of Big Life Financial Services. Phil, talk a little bit about IULs and how you can invest from your cash value policy to invest in real estate.
Yeah, I mean, hello, everybody. How's everybody doing, all right? Happy Friday. I'm a Philadelphia Eagles fan, so I'm already excited. Thank you, Greg. The way that my partner Jordan and I work with a lot of real estate investors predominantly is very similar to what you're trying to accomplish. Grow a legacy, protect your wealth, create income streams for yourself that you can't outlive, that you can pass on to your heirs, to your beneficiaries. And we have a very non-traditional product to help that. It's called Index Universal Life Insurance. It's a product that has a number of different functions. It's a life insurance policy first and foremost, okay? It protects you if something were to happen so you don't have to dip into other assets, like sell properties off or take out equity lines. It also has, as Greg alluded to, a cash value component to it that you're able to borrow against, that you're able to take money out tax-free and then replace it once you close one of your real estate deals. It also gives you the opportunity and can provide you with tax-free income at retirement. So as a complement to as you're growing wealth and you're generating income for yourself, this is a way to generate tax-free income for yourself, right? And the government limits how much money you can put into these contracts, right? And typically when the government limits something, that means it's pretty good, right? If it was bad, they would feel like, all right, you can dump as much money into this as humanly possible and it would be okay. It's a great strategy. It's non-traditional. It's not really talked about that much because it's not very mainstream. And it's something when we sit down with clients and prospective clients to review their overall plan, it's one strategy that is heavily leveraged, especially in the real estate industry, because it's a great way to be, in essence, be your own bank.
We have a question in the back?
Yes, how much do you have to pay into it? How long do you have to own it before you can borrow?
That's a great question because that comes up a lot. It's a buy and hold type strategy, right? It's not something where you look at it and say, okay, I'm going to put money in this and get access to this money within 6 months. You have to give the cash value a little time to grow, right? To accumulate inside of the policy. But it also depends on how much you're going to contribute to the life insurance, to the insurance policy as well. We use it as an asset. For every person, it varies, right? It's not a blanket statement that we would just make because everybody's situation is unique to themselves. So we would have to do that analysis and figure out if it makes sense, how much are you comfortable with contributing? And then here would be the time frame that would make sense based on how much you're contributing, where you can draw a sizable amount out and then do what Greg did for his daughter, which is another thing that a lot of people do. They purchase the insurance policies on their children, give it time to grow, and then when they become of age, give them an opportunity to then use this as their own private lender.
What type of return do you receive on that?
The nice thing about these types of contracts is that they're Index Universal Life is a particular product where its returns are linked to an index, but they're not directly on that index. So we have a strategy that's called the S&P point to point. Everybody's aware of the S&P 500, right? It's an index in the market that goes up and down. Because it's a crediting strategy, the policy credits a portion of your return. So if the S&P 500 does 15% that year, we're going to credit 9.5% interest to the contract. One of the biggest benefits among many is the fact that on this Index Universal Life policy, there's a 0% floor. So your money's not at risk. So when the S&P goes down, because it's an interest crediting strategy, right? It's not directly linked to the S&P 500. In a down year, like we saw in 2022, our clients are getting 0% credited, so they're not losing. So the S&P was down 18%. So you're not going to lose 18%. Okay? Good question.
So what's the limit that you can put into one of those accounts? And then also, can you put one in your business name?
Yeah, you can put one in your business name. We do a lot of that.
Mm-hmm.
There are maximums that you can put in. And again, it varies for each person. And that's when we design these types of strategies, we look at the maximum that you can put in and then get a range on what you're comfortable with, Mr. or Mrs. Client, because it's important. These contracts really work well when they're funded correctly. And that's what Greg did. He did a nice job funding his daughter's IUL correctly to give it a chance to grow, to accumulate where she can then pull some of that money out. And that's where we run into a lot of problems when we review existing policies, right, Jordan? And we're talking about this strategy because it is a life insurance policy, right? It's not an investment. So there are fees and expenses for the insurance protection, right? A lot of people are out there, unfortunately, just slinging this as an investment vehicle, which it's not. Okay, so we got to make sure that you're funding it to a level where you're taking care of the fees and expenses inside of the insurance part, and a large portion of that is going towards the cash value accumulation and giving it time to grow, and then allowing you to then go in and pull significant money out to be able to use it as you wish.
Let's, all right.
Sorry, Greg.
We'll bring Phil back up here, you guys. Let me finish this and then we'll bring
Sorry,
Phil
man.
back up.
I don't want that.
And so no, that's good. And so we talk about the IUL as it relates to real estate investing, and you can use that as a vehicle to be your own private lender. But it's cash value money. You could use it for college, your children's college fund. You could use it for whatever. Okay? Right there.
Along those same lines, how are you familiar with some of the instruments of being your own hard money lender, using like an IRA or 401k, not necessarily taking out a bit of borrowing against
Absolutely.
it, similar to.
So we'll be talking about that. Maybe the next one. I'm gonna bring Phil back, and so we'll talk about that. We'll talk about what's called. Anybody ever heard of infinite banking, like being your own bank? And so we'll be talking about those things too. All right. So one of the downsides of buying and holding real estate, you guys, is you've got to minimize turnover. What hurts us, and what will hurt you when you're buying and holding real estate, is having to turn that property over, having to get new tenants. And so what happens to your cash flow doesn't go away, but you've got to eat into your cash flow when your tenant, either you have to kick your tenant out, you have to evict your tenant, or your tenant decides not to renew, because now you've got expenses. And the property goes 2 months, 3 months, maybe 4 months with no revenue coming in. And you've got, at bare minimum, sometimes you have to pay for new carpet or paint or whatever else. And so you guys tell me, anybody out there, what are some of the things that we can do to minimize turnover? One last thing I'll say is the tenant is not your enemy. The tenant is your friend. The tenant is your client. You do whatever you can to keep that tenant happy, because the longer they're in the property, the more money you're going to make. What can we do? What can we do to keep that tenant in there, keep that tenant happy? Gary?
One, have a nice place to begin with for the tenant to select. My opinion has always been that the nicer your place looks, the better tenant that you attract. And you gotta remember, people, the leases up, and if your place isn't looking good, folks have choices.
So folks have choices, and they want to live. Tenants want to live just like we're living. And so what I do is, we have a running joke in our coaching program. I won't mention the person's name, but but what I do is I still put granite, stainless steel in my properties, wherever they are, Baltimore, wherever, because I want my tenant to Gary's point, love my property and want to stay there forever, because the longer they stay, they're paying off my mortgage.
Yeah.
And so as opposed to some other people that just put it kind of rent ready. But that's not, and so that's a strategy. That strategy costs less in the beginning, but sometimes in the long run, that's gonna cost you more, because you've got to put in new cabinets and countertops and flooring and things like that. And so I try to put in quality, because quality is gonna last. What else? What else can we do?
We signed out tenant to a 2-year lease.
Okay.
Of course, the profit margin won't change in the second year. This is our first one, so we already have a pretty good cash flow.
So signing a tenant to a 2-year lease is good. The downside of that is, if you got an issue with your tenant, let's say in the first 6 months, you got 18 more months to deal with them. So you're betting that it's going to be the perfect tenant, right?
Well, not necessarily, but we bet that it's a nice place.
It is a nice place, but you're dealing with tenants, you're dealing with personalities. And so you go over there and there's a dog, a cat, a pig, a goat in your house. Tyrone them all up in the house. Now you got issues. Now you got 18 more months to deal with Tyrone them.
Yeah. That's the risk we all run, though.
Not
for 2 years.
I don't want to run that risk.
All right.
Anything can happen.
Well, we're inspecting on Monday anyway.
Did you have a question?
This is Statham. With my rentals, I have minimized the rent increases. If they're taking care of the property and paying the rent on time, that keeps them there a little bit longer.
So you reward them for being a good tenant.
Yes.
And so the question is, are there other ways that you can reward them but still increase the rent? That's really the
Yeah,
question.
I increase the rent, but I don't increase it as much as most people would, where I still can get, another 2% as opposed to 5%.
Right.
Yeah, at Christmas, I give my tenants $200 off of their rent every year. And they appreciate that because I have a tenant who's on Section 8, but they pay part of the rent out of their pocket. So out of their portion, I think it's like $561 or something. I'll take $200 off of it.
That's good. Anybody else?
So the gentleman said here, he says if it would do an inspection, do you all like inspect your properties over time?
So good. So that's a really good question. I'm glad you brought it up. The landlords that run into trouble with their properties are the landlords that just, they don't inspect. And so I would say inspect at least every quarter. At least every quarter inspect. Now, knowing that if you have Section 8 tenants, and I know we've talked a lot about Section 8, Section 8 is going to inspect once a year, but you inspect once a quarter. Because you want to make sure that, everything, they're not tearing up the property. So I would say once a quarter, give them notice, give them a week's notice and inspect. And inspection you don't have to have a white glove on inspecting, that kind of thing. But just kind of walk through the house, make sure everything is intact. The Section 8 inspection is thorough. Section 8 is going to give you a list of things that you need to do. It's going to give the tenant a list of things that they're supposed to do. The tenant if they don't do their list, Section 8 will kick them out the program. We had a good tenant, good Section 8 tenant in Cheverly. Section 8 went and did an inspection and gave her a list, gave me a list. I did my things. She didn't do her things on the list, but she was a good tenant, kept the place pristine. Guess what I did?
Did her part.
I did her part.
Yeah.
So I wanted to keep her.
Yeah.
I didn't want to run the risk of, and she was paying her portion, kept the house up. I just did what she was supposed to do to keep that tenant into the property. So sometimes you give them a favor because they're taking care of your business. They're taking care of your retirement. That's an asset that you can carry and your children can carry over. So if they're taking care of it, why not give them a favor?
Greg, could you speak to, you already done that partially, but speak a little more to the customer service aspect of landlord to a tenant?
And so just basically, as I said earlier, I don't want you guys thinking that the tenant is your enemy or the tenant is less than, or because they're renting or because they're a Section 8 tenant, that they're less of a person than you are. You treat them right, treat them with dignity. You give, she gave what'd you give?
$200 off.
$200 off. Some of you guys that know Joseph, who spoke about this a few months ago, he gives them a vacation. If they're a good tenant, he gives them a vacation. I think he has either a timeshare or a rental property. He gives them a week's vacation. But he has his tenants, and some of mine as well, 20 years. So they've more than paid for his property. Go ahead. So you just basically want to treat them good. You want to treat them like you would want to be treated.
Yeah.
And a lot of landlords think that the tenant has to be their enemy. that they're a terrible person. It should be the opposite mindset. Because they're building you wealth. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I just want to get your opinion on the best tenant, like elderly, military type of person, or senior. I mean, what do you suggest? Like, I mean.
Go ahead, Jay.
Okay, so I think that for me, the best tenant, where I find the best tenants is in the screening process.
Is the what?
Screening process.
Screening process.
So there'll be plenty of interest in your property if you have good properties, whatever. Or even if you don't have like stainless steel and granite and all that stuff, you'll still have a lot of interest in your property and you'll still be fine. But you gotta make sure your personalities mesh, especially if you're gonna be managing your property. So one of the properties I purchased in Baltimore, I purchased with a tenant in place. And nothing about that was right. Like, I ain't like her, she ain't like me. I ain't like nothing about her, like at all. And so she's never somebody I would have rented to. She probably wouldn't have wanted to rent for me.
Like a credit check with them?
So all that, beyond that, I mean, like even like interviewing, right? Just do our personalities mesh? Like, does it make sense? Is the vibe there? It sounds weird, but it's
No,
true.
it's true.
Like, is the vibe there, right? Are they gonna be able to communicate with you? She had like flushed like a screwdriver down the toilet and then like blamed it on my contractor. And I was like, wait, what? It was just a weird mix. So interviewing, you could talk to their past landlords.
Take a look at
Really,
their property.
that they live in now. That's really gonna tell you how your property is gonna be looking. So all those things are critically important.
Including a background check, like a criminal check.
Yeah, I always do a criminal check, but I always have an open house. So I'm an open house and I have a notebook and I take copious notes. Okay, Miss Jones with the red shirt that came right down here, tats all over here. She had about 25 kids under the age of 2. I take notes.
That's not fair, though.
No,
That's not fair.
no.
That's stereotyping.
No.
And of course,
right.
So
Yeah, but not only
People with
that.
tattoos are good people.
No, I got it. No, I'm not saying that. No, I'm not saying that, but what I'm saying is, you got to decide on what's best for you. But when you have an open house, you have different type of people that come in there, some that work, some that don't work. You have to figure it out. But then that's the time you get to talk to them. That's the time you get to have this conversation with them and see, hey, oh, you do have a job? Oh, you pay half of your rent? Okay, that works. And what does that look like?
But to her point, though, if you're going Section 8, you guys, there's Section 8 tenants that have full vouchers, meaning the government or the city pays all of the rent. And there's Section 8 tenants with partial vouchers, where they pay a portion. And according where Section 8 pays a portion and the tenant pays the other part, depending on how much money they make. My preference is tenants with Section 8 tenants with full vouchers. Now I'm not dealing with their portion. Because even though they pay a portion, oftentimes that portion is late or not at all. Go ahead, Brian.
For the property you self-manage, do you have a software to keep up with all that's going on with the properties? And the other question is, how do you determine the rent money that you get? Do you have different bank accounts for each property, or how does that work?
And so I put all of my rental income into one account. I do self-manage. I don't necessarily, I use QuickBooks, but there is property management software, Buildium, Yardi, and a few others that are pretty good.
Do you put all your properties in one single LLC, or do you have a separate LLC for each?
And so what I do is I put 2 or 3 properties into one LLC. And so I separate them out that way. And the reason I do that is because let's say you've got 10 properties in one LLC and that LLC gets sued. So now, all the properties are in that LLC. And all the properties are in an LLC, not personally in my name.
How do you start from the Section 8 process? Like,
You said, how do you start?
finding that tenant that, you know, you were Section 8, how do you like,
How do you start the process?
yeah, you like reach out to them and say, do you call Section 8?
Yeah, you just go to the Section 8 office, wherever jurisdiction you're in, and then they'll send you out the paperwork. And you fill out that paperwork. Susan, you want to speak to that? How does one start the Section 8 process?
Landlord or tenant?
Landlord.
So you wanna.
I'm sorry, are you a landlord or a tenant? Okay,
So you wanna reach
that
out
was a
to,
joke.
You wanna reach out, to Section 8, and familiarize yourself with this, with their system, depending on which county it is. We do a lot in Baltimore City. And so different counties have different, processes, but usually if you get to know somebody that's there, they'll tell you what that needs to be done, and usually you just tell them that you want, to be on their list. So when you have a listing or you have a property, you can post it on their website. But also, usually the tenant already has their voucher, so they're already working with Section 8, they already know the criteria of how many bedrooms, what Baltimore City's gonna pay for them as their portion. But a lot of times, it's good to just go down there, familiarize yourself with them, get to know somebody, you can post flyers of your property there. And they also have monthly meetings for landlords as well, that you can go and sit in on to learn the process, of what you have to do once you get the voucher. Once you've run the credit application, the background and check, the interviewing, and if you think you're okay, you're gonna move forward with this person, then, there's some documents that you have, as a landlord, have to complete along with the tenant to get that submitted back to their case manager, so they can start, the process.
And then there's some
Send them the
inspections.
leads,
Speak to the,
Yeah,
some of the inspections that they need.
Yeah, so they'll do an inspection of the house. They have guidelines also for the landlords on what needs to be done. I've learned from experience with Greg's properties, a lot, what they require. I remember we had basement steps, but we didn't have anything in between the railing. And if it's so much, width in between, you have to put drywall or something to cover it up because it's a safety hazard. Kid or somebody might slip through. So there's certain criteria that they have, and they'll provide the list for you of what they want. But you can also, Google, Section 8, in whatever county you're looking for, and there's a lot of information on their website as well.
And so termite inspection, lead-based paint inspection, you have to have a rental license, and just all the jurisdictions now. So all of those things.
Okay, what I found out also with Section 8 is how much they, okay, let's say you want to rent your place, but with Section 8, it depends on the location.
Correct, it depends on the zip code,
Right.
of where the total amount that they're gonna rent with or without utilities included,
Right.
per, bedroom.
Right, yeah, because, over on each place, you see, okay, okay, one amount for this, but not far from here, they'll only pay.
Yeah, they not only do they go by zip codes, but they go by subdivisions too.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Okay, Dana?
Yes, I guess at this point, market tenants are probably the least desirable. The more successful investors like Greg and some of the other big people use strictly Section 8. But I want you all to know there is another avenue for renting, and it's PA programs, there's battered women's programs, there's programs where you can make more money actually per month, and the inspection is not as stringent. So it's just another avenue. But Section 8 probably put that.
So our students, my platinum coaching students, have explored other programs. Some like nonprofit programs where they place veterans and battered women, and who else are we dealing with?
There's many.
There's many. You get more money. You get more money per month with those programs. And so some of my coaching students have ventured off and used those programs. I have not. Here's why. And so in order, and this is just my opinion, in order to make a lot of money with rental properties, in my opinion, you want to keep those tenants in that property as long as you can. 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. All of those programs are temporary programs. Those tenants those battered women are only there for like a year or two. The veterans program are only there. And then they slowly but surely try to wean them off the program. So slowly but surely they have them paying a little more a month, then a little more a month themselves, and they wean them off. And so we talked about turnover already today. And so with all of those programs, you have turnover. It's just automatic because they're only in those programs for a year or two. And it's good if you want, more rent up front, maybe for the first 2 years. But what I don't like is in the end, you lose money because now you got to get them out. Property is vacant for a couple of years, so you're not getting, couple months, now you're not getting any income. And then you have to clean up that property to get it ready for another tenant. So there's pros and cons to everything. And so for me, I'd rather have a tenant in there where I have a good chance of keeping them in there for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, so that I don't have to pay the cost of the turnover. Would you?
I was just gonna say, and also when you do a turnover, then you gotta do a new lead test. You gotta do an inspect, all of that, anytime you have a turnover.
So there's pros and cons.
You only, but you're not turning over the whole house though. It's one room.
Well, it's room. It is room by room.
And then when they go out, someone comes right back in.
It's pros and cons. So I'm just telling you what's best for me. Dana's in the back, he's just like, and so you guys pick and choose but there's many different ways. Did you have a question?
Yeah, so what's the difference in terms of the rent that you would be able to get at market rate versus Section 8? Is it the same, or are you taking a bit of a loss on the Section 8 on the front end?
So I would say that you're taking just a little bit of loss on the Section 8. But for me, it's worth it because number one, I don't have to worry about on the first of the month, whether it's a pandemic, recession, no matter what the economy is doing, that payment is in my account on the first. And I don't have to track down a tenant. And so it's just a lot less management. And so, those tenants, the Section 8 tenants versus the market rate tenants, the Section 8 tenants are staying in the property longer. It's not to say that I wouldn't take a market rate tenant. In certain areas, when you're renting out a property, Section 8 is going to be way too low in certain areas and where it just doesn't make sense. But in a lot of the B and C neighborhoods that we invest in, it's just better with Section 8. All right, the last thing I want to talk about is just the variety of different types of properties that you can buy and hold that's going to give you cash flow. And so we have students that have done Airbnb in our program. That's an incredible amount of cash flow. Commercial properties, multifamily. I think a lot of us want to do multifamily because everything is just kind of right there versus, let's say we have a 10 unit. It's better to have that 10 unit. That 10 unit is right here versus 10 different houses all around. It's a lot less expenses. They call it the economies of scale. Everything is just right here. And so the management, maintenance, everything is just right there. And so multifamily is great. And so it's whatever you want to do. We kind of started off talking about what does the end look like for you and how much money do you want in positive cash flow at the end of the day when you're done, when you're sick and tired of your job and you want enough cash flow so that can justify you quitting your job or retiring yourself? What does that look like? And sometimes you can escalate that goal by having multifamily, by having Airbnb in the right locations. Wrong locations. I was in a conversation either today or yesterday with someone that was doing Airbnb, and in a lot of jurisdictions like Prince George's County, like DC, Airbnb, you can only do, I was telling him you can only do it for 180 days a year. And they would say, no, they passed something where it's only 90 days a year. And so if you do Airbnb, my suggestion would be to be in areas like Annapolis, Maryland, where there's no Airbnb laws, there's no Airbnb license, you can do it all year round. And so you just have to pick and choose. And then of course, all the coastal cities, like one of our guys has, I think Leon has 2 or 3 in Myrtle Beach. And so you got to think outside of the area as well. But you want to choose, in my opinion, you want to choose an area where if you're doing Airbnb, in my opinion, you can do it all year round, where there's no Airbnb license and there's not a lot of regulation. Do you guys want to add anything to that? I'm doing a good job.
You're doing a great job.
All right, any questions, you guys? Go ahead.
I work for the federal government, right? Like 17 years, and I already quit my job too.
You've been in for 17?
Yeah. So.
Could you retire in like 3 more years?
So, and everybody's situation is different, but in your opinion, like, what would be like a good cushion to have, like, you know, once I'm ready to like walk away? Like, what's the?
You replace that income.
Yeah, I would say at the very least, replace your income.
Yeah.
At the very least. And then obviously have a plan, a good plan of attack to move forward.
Yeah, and I probably would go a little higher because not only do you want your income, you gotta have a little cushion because no longer are those checks coming in every 2 weeks. So you have to remember that because if something goes down, you will still want to have enough cushion in there to where you don't send yourself in panic mode. Because it happens.
Anybody else? Go ahead.
Do you have a preferred or recommended strategy? So like when you buy a property that needs to be fixed, for funding the renovations, because you're gonna take out a mortgage on it if you get it, if you win the bid, but then you're also gonna need to fix it up. So.
And so what I do is I get a loan that encompasses the acquisition, you buying a property, and the renovation. So I get one loan that will that has the renovation in it. And so what I do, and this is just what I do, we're just speaking from our experiences. So what I do is I'll get that one loan and to buy the property, renovate the property. And then, and this is the BRRRR method. And then I will rent the property out. And then a permanent lender is going to want to see the rent rolls. And so then I'll rent the property out and then refinance to permanent financing. And that's basically the BRRRR method. All right, any other questions? You guys ready to buy and hold? Huh? Huh?
We need some more excitement.
I know.
Are we ready to buy and hold?
Yeah.
There we go.
And so I often get the question, do you need to have a real estate license to buy and hold real estate or to be a real estate investor? And the answer is no. The answer is no, you don't have to. But I will say that one of the reasons why I got my real estate license is because I started off as an investor. I didn't get my real estate license until many years later. The reason I got my real estate license is because I was relying on real estate agents to feed me information, pull comps, find properties. They were moving too slow for me. And so still in my 20s, I said, I'm just going to be my own agent and get my own license. And so I highly recommend getting your license. And so we own a real estate brokerage where we focus on, we're 100%, but we do focus on building wealth. I tell through real estate investing, I tell my real estate agents that listing and selling real estate will make you a good living. It's active income and it'll make you a living, but you will never, ever become wealthy. You become wealthy through investing. So this is Susan in the back right here. Wave your hand, Susan. She's taking, she's doing her job. And so she's our recruiter. So if you guys are interested in joining our brokerage, you can either get with her or you can go to joinbrs.com. It's on one of these pages. What page is it on? Susan, you should know your page, page 6. Joinbrs.com. If you don't have a real estate license, there's a link to get your real estate license. There's also a link to, if you want to make an appointment, to join us. Keith Bennett, stand up, Keith. So Keith runs our investment company, where our coaching program, where I would highly recommend, as I look around the room, a lot of our coaching students are in here. They've been highly successful. I would highly recommend getting around a group of people that are like-minded, that's going to help you build wealth this year, 2023. We have the best coaching program. I'm proud to say, obviously I'm biased, but we have the best coaching program in this area. We not only, we have classroom setting where we teach, we go out in the field. We have a display, a platform called Coach Accountable, where Keith's able to communicate with our coaching students. In Coach Accountable, there's letters and tools and contracts, everything that you need to be a real estate investor is all in there. I think did I steal your whole speech?
No. But guys, I would say that you can't get it all in this setting, right? We all know that. And so you got to take action. You know, it's the middle of February. And so you got to take action. I see a lot of my students here are great students. Ralph just signed up last week. Stand up so everyone can see Ralph.
Welcome, Ralph.
Yeah, give him a round of applause. Give him a round of applause. But he's decided to take action. No more playing around. Let's get off the fence. And he's in a program. And so now we're going to hold his hand every step of the way. And we can do this for you guys as well. We believe that our program is quite affordable. $2,500, or you can make $497 monthly payments over 6 months. And so no excuses, guys. Let's go. Like I said, you know, we can get this training here, but it's not enough. We need to get Greg to maybe sit down with you and scale your business from where you are now and where you're trying to go. And so we can do that for you. So we are set up in the back if you guys are interested, and I'm going to be here too if you have questions about Platinum Coaching and exactly what do you get. I'll be here to explain that to you. But they're set up in the back. I see Stephanie back there and Susan. If you're ready to make a payment, let's do it right now. Also, I want to say too that we're very interested in learning what else you want to learn in these lunch and learns. So fill out this, but on the back, take time to maybe write down a subject that you're interested in so that we can follow up and we can try to give you the good training and education that you need.
And so last words, any words of advice?
My 2 cents is make sure you have a mentor, a coach, somebody that can walk you through this game. Because even being an agent, you don't know how to be an investor. It's a whole different ballgame. And without the connections and the network and the people that can pick up the phone and just call and say, hey, I done messed up, how do I fix this? It's hard. It's hard. I would not come into this game without any representation. You wouldn't go into a courtroom without an attorney. Don't come into this game. When you get into a property and realize, oh shoot, it's more work than I thought, you gotta be able to phone a friend. And if you do not have one, you're setting yourself up for going into these properties unequipped.
I told one of my agents yesterday, he bought a property in Baltimore and things just didn't go well. He ended up he said, Greg, I'm just gonna sell the property. And the one thing I told him was, he brought me on, once he got into trouble. But I said, don't get discouraged, because what happens is most investors, they get out there, they fail the first time, second time, and they stop. Dana stopped for years. And I don't want that to happen to you. A coach will help you minimize your mistakes, but get you to your goals a lot faster. Jay?
Yeah, I echo the same thing. Get a mentor, get a coach. Again, I don't get anything from telling you guys that. I'm a full-time entrepreneur. I don't have a check coming every 2 weeks. And so every bit of money that I spend matters to me. But making an investment in the coaching program was probably one of the best decisions I made last year. So get coached up. Beyond being able to glean from his, well, you're not that far from 20, but his, is it many years of experience or is it not? His many years of experience, equally as important are my peers that are going through it with me, right? So my ability to call Dana late at night and telling him I'm discouraged, I don't think I can do it, and him telling me, no, Jay, you can, or call Valerie, and we ping pong ideas. Karen has given me a coaching session on Prop Stream at 5 p.m. today. Like, these are people that are going through it with me in real life. Equally as important as having access to him is having access to them. You guys really need to get coached up. I promise you, you won't regret it.
And then Phil, any last words? Phil's going to be here, you guys, if you have any questions on the insurance side. One last thing on the insurance side, you guys, is I would never, ever purchase a property, whether it's my own residential property or investment property, and not have enough insurance to cover that property in case you pass away or have a critical, chronic, or terminal illness. You want to have enough insurance. And some of that is called mortgage life protection. And so you want to protect yourself, protect your loved ones. Any last words, Phil?
You did it, man. You did all the last words. It's all good.
And so this is Tiffany. So Stephanie, the other Tiffany, works on the big life side. If you guys want to schedule an appointment, either with Phil or Stephanie or just us in general, you just get with Stephanie in the back. And so what I would say is, we talk about scheduling appointments. What I would say is schedule an appointment. It doesn't mean you have to purchase. Doesn't mean you have to purchase the coaching program. Keith will give you a free 30-minute strategy session. And so what we want is for you to build wealth. And we want to help you in any way we can. And so we set our prices such that it's very affordable. We all know the importance of insurance, but insurance is not just for people dying. It's for people, really, it's for people living, and you're building wealth, especially if you get a cash value policy that you're building cash while you're making your monthly payments to the insurance carrier. Part of that payment is building cash for yourself. The longer you have the policy, the more that payment's going towards the cash value. So it's compounding into your account, into your policy. And now you're able to use that money to build more wealth. So these insurance policies, and there's a number of them, are really for the living. We call it living benefits, but it's really for the living to help you build wealth. Let's make 2023 our best year ever. Let's get the information and do something with it. You guys sat here for about an hour and a half and got a lot of information. Hopefully you guys took a lot of notes. Let's make good use of this. Let's make good use of this time. Let's build the wealth. Let's live up to our fullest potential. Your excuse is not going to be you didn't know, or you don't have the resources, or there's no one that can coach you, or there's nobody that looks like you doing this. That's not your excuse. The excuse is going to be that you didn't take action. You got to execute. That's one thing that I'm proud of Lyric. I've known Lyric for a long time. She used to do hair, then she owned a shop, and then daycare, and so she's an entrepreneur, serial entrepreneur. Jay the same way, but they take action. And so that's something that you guys are going to have to do, is take action in order to build wealth. And it starts now. We're already into February. This year's going to get, we're going to look up and it's going to be, November, December, and you didn't do anything this year. And so let's do something, you guys. All right, you guys, appreciate your time. There's food in the back. Bill is right here. Steve is right there. Let's make some money this year, you guys. Hey, Susan.
Yeah.
What's up, buddy? Absolutely. Oh, yeah.